When it was morning, the east wind brought the locusts. They did eat every herb of the land and all the fruit of the trees, and there remained not any green thing.
With all this going on, major grain-growing nations imposed strict export bans to ensure that food would be affordable at home. Pressure on the international market thus became quite intense. And I believe we have yet to see the back of it.
They cheated. See, I believe in comparative advantage, so that even if a country can produce everything that it needs, it would still benefit from specializing in what it does best and trading that with other nations. So obviously, there should never be any restrictions on imports, especially for agriculture.
If countries consider that they should not take the risk of the prices of food rising in the future, and if they want to impose export bans in order to export at higher prices later, then it is dangerous. It is a form of speculation, as criticizable as speculation by private actors.
We actually think the export bans that have been put in place is actually one of the principal drivers to the current food price crisis. And the reason we say that is as they've come off, we've noticed downward pressure on prices as a result. But countries did it for one very simple reason, to make sure they had plenty of supplies internally to keep their own food prices down. Unfortunately, all that does is transfer the price pressures from their market into the global markets.
What we have had is a very distorted system of international trade, whereby farmers in developing countries were unable to compete with our farmers because of the very important public support benefiting our farmers. Some $300 billion per year were paid by OECD countries to their farmers, thereby artificially lowering the prices on international markets and basically ruining agricultural production in developing countries.
The story of foreign trade is a story that is most important to the vital problems of nationalism and internationalism. Countries striving for their own economic advantage, but wishing for global understanding and peace.
Las multinacionales, ellos no piensan en la gente. Ellos piensan en reenriquecerse cada vez más, ¿no? En ver todo en esa forma de eficientismo, de rentabilidad, de ver cuánto estoy ganando. Es eso, ¿no? A ellos no les interesa para nada el bienestar social de la gente.
Sales, they've got to go up. Expenses, they've got to go down. And I mean right now. And don't forget it.
Hay una empresa que es de las más importantes en Estados Unidos en la exportación. Y en México es la importadora. ¿Sí? Entonces compró las cosechas de maíz a un precio bajo y al paso de mes y medio, 2 meses, duplicó los precios, creando de una manera ficticia una crisis de abasto que no hay.
Le dumping agricole détruit l'agriculture africaine, l'arrogance, l'égoïsme, le cynisme de l'Union européenne dans ce domaine est absolument incroyable. Et puis après, on s'étonne qu'à Lampedusa, dans le détroit de Sicile, qu'aux Canaries, dans l'Atlantique du Nord, ou dans la mer Rouge, Somalie, Yémen, il y a toutes les semaines des centaines et des centaines sur des pirogues, personnes sur des pirogues, sur des barques pourries, arrivent, des dizaines meurent chaque semaine, des réfugiés de la faim. Et que fait l'Europe? Par des moyens militaires, les renvoie.
Ils payent chacun 400 000 francs. Avec les 400 000, on achète l'essence, les moteurs pour partir jusqu'à l'île d'Almeria ou bien Tenerife. Soit on peut s'en sortir, soit on peut mourir en mer. Il n'y a que ces 2 moyens, mais on va tenter d'un seul coup pour aller là-bas. Parce que c'est bien payé.
Le riz du Pakistan, là, c'est plus économique. Oui. Bon, le riz du Niger, c'est plus bon que le riz importé, là. Il y a plus de qualité que le riz importé. Vraiment. C'est que ce n'est pas beaucoup bénéfique. C'est pour cela qu'on achète le riz importé. Sinon, notre riz est plus bon.
Wherever man brought abundance
independence from the land and was free to trade, civilization advanced. One of the greatest was the Roman Empire. When Rome fell, Europe entered the Dark Ages. Law and order gave way to force of arms. To survive, farmers had to buy protection from local warlords. The price was their freedom. The farmer was now a serf, lowest caste in the social order, no longer working for himself, held in bondage by the noble on the hill.
Vous savez que les 122 pays du tiers-monde, au 31 décembre dernier, ont eu une dette extérieure cumulée de plus de 2100 milliards de dollars. Énorme. Alors pour des pays très pauvres, comme le Honduras, comme le Sénégal, comme la Mongolie, le Bangladesh, etc., la dette agit comme un garrot. Et ceux qui ont la vraie souveraineté dans ces pays, c'est le Fonds monétaire international qui administre cette dette. Et ce Fonds monétaire international, les corbeaux noirs de Washington, à travers les programmes d'ajustement structurel, de refinancement de la dette, impose partout l'agriculture d'exportation. Les paysans sont forcés de planter du coton, de la canne à sucre, ce qui, évidemment, est conforme à la logique de la dette, payer les intérêts aux banques du Nord. Il faut pouvoir exporter, puisqu'avec une gourde haïtienne ou enfin avec des monnaies locales, vous ne pouvez pas servir la dette. Exportation. Donc, mais là où pousse le coton, ne pousse pas le riz.
I think that the division of labour and comparative advantages can be an extremely strong base
for strengthening production and income.
It's historically shown so. To put everything that's important to you into a free market context is perhaps not a choice that any human being
Beings make in history, and I don't suppose it's going to happen tomorrow.
Moi, j'ai connu la population 800 000 quand moi j'étais petit, au Bénin. Mais aujourd'hui, c'est 5 millions. Vous voyez?
Dans la vallée, la crue vient, il n'y a pas de terre. L'homme se retrouve avec sa femme seulement dans la chambre. Et quand la femme et l'homme se retrouvent dans la chambre, qu'est-ce qu'il peut faire? Embrasser sa femme et puis après, c'est des enfants qui sortent.
Malthus was worried about food. He said, human beings have the ability to increase their population almost without limit. After all, historically, starvation and disease was the only thing that had held down population. So it seemed that if more and more food becomes available, automatically more human beings will be born who will eat up that food, and you will constantly be on that bread line. And at some point of time, the diminishing returns from land, the diminishing availability of good arable land, will cause a food crisis, which will afflict humanity as a long-term problem. Why was he wrong? He was wrong because the greatest natural resource of all turns out not to be land, not minerals, but the human mind. The human ingenuity, the human productivity.
We see in some countries 2 to 4% of the population is producing enough for the domestic demand and even exporting. And in other countries, 80% of the population is not producing enough even for the consumption of the country. So it's not a matter of population. It's the population and the tools they use to be able to be more productive and to be more effective. And this is through technology and through investment.
Call this a comeback. They're treating me like the village idiot out there. They might as well be throwing vegetables.
Mr. Popularity's gone off the limelight, has he? What, been frightening the children again with impending nutritional apocalypse?
Oh, come off it, Ricky. If you're playing the charmer with these cretins, it's just because you want out as badly as I do. Every night, rubber of wrists, it's same old ghostly faces, insipid, the whole thing. I'm dead tired of being dead.
But that's my point entirely, old fruit. One is not dead as long as one is thought of. So, deep breath, fix your wig, and get back in there and give the public what they want.
What? You mean a future? Some say that there is and always will be enough food, and that the problem now is simply one of distribution. I'm aware of that. I realize that my observations are for many people hard to digest, but that does not make them any less true. Darwin, based on these self-same ideas, Charles Darwin came up with his theory of natural selection, and just because he focuses on animals, he's acceptable in polite society, even now. Well, man is an animal. A vice-ridden animal, but luckily so, for were he not, he would overbreed himself out of existence. Man's vices are active and able ministers of depopulation. But should they fail in this war of extermination, epidemics, pestilence, and plague advance in terrific array, with famine following to complete the great work of extermination. Which is not to say that the situation is entirely without hope.
Great new harvesting systems and distribution methods had to be developed to bring these crops from faraway farms fresh to our tables. And so a rolling factory gathers together the goodness of nature and does it economically. Through imagination and hard-won knowledge, through science and technology, agriculture works newer and newer miracles.
So the challenge is to protect the growing lands that we have in the world, and in every sense. That means making sure they aren't polluted, making sure they're properly irrigated, but it's also about seeing that we get the maximum yield per hectare that you can do in that climate or that region. And if we do that, we won't talk about a world food problem again for the rest of this century. It's the next 10 years that are really important, because by the 2030s and 40s, the world population growth will roll over.
The World Bank has estimated that by 2050, we should double the production of food. By 2030, we should increase it by 50%. And this is an immense challenge. Because this is a challenge which is put forward to us, there is a big risk that we will put the emphasis on producing more without asking the real question, which is producing for the benefit of whom, in the interest of whom, in order to increase the purchasing power of which segments of the population.
Well, to produce more food, there's really two choices. One is expanding the global land bank. There are places you can do that, but it's not without ecological consequences. Or we continue to drive up the harvest yields. That's the output per hectare. We've seen an increase in harvest yield. It's been about 3% per annum over the last 40, 50 years, especially thanks to the green revolution that we saw in the 1970s, where investment capital went into the sector. And I think that if we're to avert an all-out food crisis, we really need to see a new green revolution that's bringing capital into agri-technologies like seeding, like fertilizer optimization, that's crop protection. These technologies are going to allow us to continue to produce more crops per hectare.
Now, when we look at the different measures, in short term, we need naturally to do food aid in the different camps in Darfur and other places where people need to be fed, and the cost of what they are eating has doubled or more. But we need, in particular, to help poor farmers increase their food production. For that, they need seeds, they need fertilizer, they need animal feed. And unfortunately, the prices of those inputs have increased more than the prices of food.
If you've got somebody living on 1 hectare of land, then all they can try and do is feed their own family out of that as best they can. They can't produce any food for somebody living in the cities. So if you're going to do, as China and India are doing, which is urbanize, what you need to do is either plan to buy all your food from abroad, which is not a very good strategy, or you've got to produce more food at home, which means you've got to have bigger units of production. I mean, you're not going to be able to buy a tractor if you've got 1.5 hectares.
The argument I sometimes see is that small farmers are a thing of the past, they've reached their productivity ceiling, and tomorrow is the time of the industrial farmer. Well, with all due respect, that's nonsense. The small farmers not reached their productivity ceiling at all, precisely because they're not using even the existing technology because of the economic constraints.
We need also to do more in storage. In some commodities, we lose between 40 and 60% of the production already made. And naturally, we need rural roads to take the inputs to the farmer to get their products to the markets.
I found the case of Saudi Arabia to be of particular interest. You see, instead of growing grain at home with water they can ill afford to spare, they now lease land in Ethiopia, which indeed makes the grain an import, but a secured one. Now, Ethiopia has a comparative advantage agriculturally, but lacks the means to build on it. Now, this seems to me a rather clever win-win arrangement.
Land leasing is going to happen. I think what you have to remember is, coming off of 40, 50 years of historically low food prices, we forgot that food is strategic. Food is strategic very much like oil is strategic. And 2008, I think, has woken us up to this reality. And importing countries like China, like Middle Eastern countries, they realize that. And in my view, just like oil, they're going to be looking in the future to get their supply from overseas.
For major crops, each 1 degree Celsius rise in temperatures can cause crop yields to fall by about 10%. So you can see how the projected global temperature of 4+ degrees this century could be devastating for agriculture.
If we have a period of global cooling, the whole world will depend on Africa. We may have just to send in armies there in order to see that we get enough food, because Africa's got everything else going for it. Brazil, Argentina, and Africa. Brazil is the only one of that group where you can say that we've got political stability, good government, and so what's happening? They are expanding their output dramatically, and they're making a great contribution to the world. Brazil was always going to be the country of the future. It's caught up to its future.
When we investigated soya expansion in the Amazon, we managed to find out where that soya was ending up in. And we made that link and we closed the chain, and we found that we were talking about chicken McNuggets, actually. So we took this issue to McDonald's and we exposed McDonald's and explained that they were actually using soya that was destroying the Amazon rainforest. Immediately the company reacted, ensuring that they are not expanding soya crops on newly deforested areas.
So we need to improve the quantity of food which is produced per hectare, and there are gains to be made, not in the US, not in Canada, not in the EU, which already are at a maximum, but probably and certainly in fact in sub-Saharan Africa, where the productivity is really much smaller per hectare than in many other parts of the world. And this is why initiatives promoting the green revolution in Africa are so important today.